And we're live again.
Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to An Honest Look.
Yes, welcome.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Today we're working with 3 different time zones. We're going all the way from the Pacific coast to the Eastern Europe. It's wild, but we figured it out. We're here. And we have a wonderful guest, Carla Fernandes. She's here today with us to share her story of transformation. I cannot wait to get into it. Welcome to the show. I want to introduce you to our audience, and then we're going to let you take the floor.
Thank you.
Carla is a transformational life and spiritual coach. She works with individuals who are seeking more out of life to help them move past burnout, overcome limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, so that they can unlock their infinite potential and begin creating a life filled with meaning and purpose. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Right? Amazing. I cannot wait to hear all about the work that you do. And really, I already have heard what your journey has been. And I can't wait to share that with the rest of the audience. Welcome to the show.
Yes. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the way from Toronto.
All the way from Toronto. Yes. Yes. Not too far from where you are, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, you're more in the center of the world, kind of. But
time zone wise, I guess.
Yeah.
Right now you are. Yeah, right now you are.
Cool. So what brought? So we are curious. I know because we love to hear the background. And how did you get into this? Like, how did this call you or speak to you or?
Yeah. So, I mean, this really started from my own experience and my own personal journey of seeking better health and just more out of life for myself. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was working as an investment advisor and had been in that career for many years. And, you know, at that point, I had sort of convinced myself that I was doing something that was meaningful and was impacting people's lives. And I know certainly it was. I was helping people through difficult financial situations and helping them navigate the complexities of, you know, the financial markets. And certainly it did feel rewarding to a certain level, but I think my soul started to call for me to do something much more profound and with more meaning, at least what meaning meant for me, helping people change in a big, profound way. But it all had to start with my own personal healing journey for myself. And at the time, I was working like 16-hour days, and I was just pouring my heart and soul into my career. And I just woke up one day and I was like, I don't know that this is for me anymore. And all the fears and doubts just started to set in because I was like, I've dedicated nearly 10, 12 years of my life at this point to this career. And I was like, well, what's next? What will be next for me if I walk away from this career? And so for, I would say probably another 2 years after that first initial sort of download that I received that I needed to make a change, I didn't do anything about it for those next 2 years. I just continued to forcefully go along with the career that I was in because I had this, again, belief system that because I had invested so much time in this career that it was a waste to just now walk away from it. But really what was happening inside my body was that there was a message that was getting louder and louder and louder for me to make this change. And I didn't realize this until actually many years later, that I was getting all these signs in my physical body and in my environment that the life that I was living at that time was just no longer resonating with the person that I was becoming and the person that I was changing into. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I continue to sort of forcefully go on about my life and continue in my career until one day I pretty much came to a point where I had a nervous breakdown and I had no choice but to actually walk away from my career and give myself some time to start my own healing process. And at that time, again, I thought I was just dealing with some physical symptoms in my body. I was feeling very tired. I was having a hard time sleeping. I wasn't eating properly. My stress levels and the anxiety in my body were so heightened that there would be times just from something so simple that I would have a major panic attack. And I was like, this isn't right. Something is going on that I need to really get to the root cause and really get down to what is showing up that is triggering all of these other symptoms in my body. And so I really started down the road of trying to find a solution for the physical symptoms that I was dealing with. And for the longest time, I went to, my GP and a bunch of different specialists to try and get a diagnosis of what was going on with me. But the results kept coming back that I was perfectly healthy. And I was so frustrated at that point in my life because I knew that I wasn't perfectly healthy. I knew there was so many things going on with me, but I just couldn't figure out what that was. And so at this point, I was sort of forced down this journey of actually investing my full time and energy into figuring out what was going to help me get through what I was dealing with. And I was in the middle of a meditation. So I'd taken some time from work. I was on a medical leave. And this is about a month in, 2 months in, about 2 months in. And I'm going through a meditation with Marissa Peers. I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but she guided us. She guided, like, it was an online event, and she was guiding us through a past a regression type of meditation. So I didn't necessarily go to a past life, but I went to an early point in my childhood. And throughout the meditation, I got this download that I needed to explore Reiki. And when I was in the meditation, I was like, I don't even know what Reiki is. I had never even heard that word, that term. And so I thought, okay, let me park this for now, and then I'll do my research later. Let's focus on the meditation. So immediately after coming out of that meditation, I started to do my research on what Reiki is. And that just opened up sort of the possibilities for me to dive into more of the alternative healing realm. So I went for my first session, and I found that to be so profound. Like it created changes at an energetic level that I didn't even really understand at the time after receiving that first initial session. But, now that I can reflect on years later, I could see how much that just by going for that energy healing session, how much it removed some blockages that I was feeling at the moment or at that time in my life. And I just fell in love with this modality to a point that I had to dive headfirst into learning more about it. And so I started the whole process of actually getting educated in energy healing and learning about the chakra systems and learning about how, we have all these different bodies, not just our physical body, but we have our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual body. And just that introduction into Reiki helped me understand that everything is so interconnected. And so if we're looking for true health in our physical body, we actually have to work on ourselves, on all of those different bodies that we have, not just the physical body. We need to look at our emotions, and we need to look at what are the mindset or some of the belief systems that we have in place that are in essence leading us to having these physical conditions. And so I spent the next, I'm going to say 5-6 years, really just diving into different realms of understanding that connection between the emotions and the physical body, as well as, our spiritual practices and our mindset, and how all of that ultimately contributes to us being on the path that is meant for us. And so how I eventually got to doing this work was just from really me going on my own journey of healing myself from my own past traumas that I had experienced. I was a child of an abusive home with, a father who was an alcoholic. And so there was a lot of trauma that stemmed from my childhood that I hadn't processed and hadn't even learned any tools to release that trauma or really work through that trauma. That when I was going through this journey, I realized that it wasn't about my work and the stress that I was going through at work. It was actually about all of this pain that I had been carrying on since I was a little girl. And because I didn't have the tools to release it or the tools to even understand what I was going through when I was a child, I allowed that to sort of get stuck into my energy and to my physical body, which is what eventually led to some of the conditions that I was dealing with. And it wasn't until I took that step back and said, okay, I really need to get to the root cause of some of this trauma that was, that happened to me as a child, or that might be coming from, past lives or other experiences in my life, that I really truly started to heal. Like it took having to go to those darker places that I had been, sort of burying under a rug for many, many years, not wanting to look at that pain and suffering. But it wasn't until I lifted the veil on that the true health started to happen in my physical body. And so, just from that experience, I just felt this big calling to, share this knowledge with the world and help people understand that so much of what we've been taught to believe about ourselves, about the world around us, is not true. And all these belief systems, it's what eventually leads us to having so many different health issues, so many different challenges in our life. And I'm sure, as you can appreciate and your listeners can appreciate, we're all here looking to live our best lives. And until we deal with some of these issues that might have stemmed from our early childhood, or even things that we're carrying from previous lifetimes, until we resolve those, it becomes very challenging for us to really step into and embody that version of ourselves that is here to really live that best life. And because I struggled for so many years, I just got this calling that I needed to get out into the world and share the message with people that there is a better way for us to live a life that's more harmonious to how we are meant to be in our true nature, rather than what we've been convinced, by society, by, our family or our friends or the people around us, that what this life is about, right? We've been taught, we come here, we go to school, we get a job, and we work at that job for the rest of our lives. And then one day we, depart and go somewhere else. But in reality, our life is supposed to be filled with much more joy and much more abundance and love. And yet we're not really taught how to access those things, because we're not taught the tools that we need in order to process some of the trauma and some of the experiences that we have, because we're here to experience them. We're not here to carry them with us for the rest of our lives with that heaviness, the pain. Yes, we're meant to take the lessons that we've learned from those experiences and do something better with our lives, but not to carry that pain and the heaviness of those experiences. And so we need to learn how to release them so that we can step into the next version of ourselves and step into that next chapter of our life.
What I found interesting, like when you talk about limiting beliefs, like the very sort of the first one that you kind of highlighted was the fact that when you were in your investor's role, you had an experience that something wasn't quite right, but you kind of washed it away with a belief that, well, what am I going to do? Like I've already invested all this time and energy in a career. I need to stick to it, kind of a thing. Right. So that one is so common.
Been through that. Yeah. There's a part of you that's attached to that person, that version of you that is identifies with that job, or like in my case was the designer, right? And that, you know, like what I discovered is that you don't have to fully reject it either. You can just take that part of you where you thrive in that personality and just transfer those skills, you know, or that what you get from, for me, doing creative work, just transfer that creativity or do it for fun, you know,
Right.
do those projects for fun, turn it into a hobby, because professionally it didn't feel fulfilling. But it really took a really long time for me to let go of the attachment of, I did so much work, all this stuff that I did to get here, like it's a waste, you know, like get out of that mindset that I had wasted my time and I couldn't let it go because of all the work that I had put into it. And then I realized once I did and stepped into what I do today, that had I not had that experience, I wouldn't have some of the skills that I have today in doing the work that I do today. So it really wasn't a waste. It was just a journey of growth, just as well as everything else in life.
And that's what you pointed to, Carla, in that transition that you, although it took you a couple of years, that it was just sort of the caterpillar turning into a butterfly scenario, except you wanted to hang on to the cocoon for as long as you could, kind of a thing, forgetting that actually you're turning into more than a butterfly right now, but we hang on to those identities so much, don't we?
We do. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that we're afraid of the reaction from the people around us when we start to shift our identity, because they know us to be a certain way, right? They see us in a certain light, or they see us, doing that particular role, or whatever that role is, right? We all have different identities, whether it's being a mother or a father or a brother or sister. Like, we all carry different identities. And when we are choosing to part ways with one of our identities, I think a lot of the fear sets in as to what are the people around us going to think, and are they going to accept this new version of me, right? Because they're not inside of us as we're changing and adapting and as we're growing and evolving, right? They may be going through their own growth and their own sort of changes, but they're not experiencing what we're experiencing. And
Or
so
not.
or not, right? Exactly. Because there's so many people out there who are choosing not to grow and choosing to stay complacent. And so that fear of what they're going to think also starts to set in to, your own sort of journey. And in a lot of cases, I know that for me, I come from a very traditional, I'm Portuguese, so very traditional small town back in Portugal, where, you work hard. Like, my parents have instilled that in each of us as children. And the thought of having to come to them and say, okay, spent the last 12 13 years building up this career in, a bank, a secure, stable organization. And all of a sudden I'm going to walk away from that security to try something different. It was extremely difficult for me to, work up the courage to be able to confront my family and let them know that these were the things that I was now being called to do. But they couldn't understand any of that, because to them, it's just about, you go out there, you get a job, you work hard, and you work hard until you're older and you retire. And then, you have a little bit of time to yourself to enjoy, if you're in relatively good health. And then one day you just, go on with your life. So I think that's also a big contributor is, the reaction of the people around us. And a lot of the times we have beliefs around what we think other people are thinking of us. And those beliefs also limit us from taking the steps forward and really doing the things that sometimes bring us the most amount of joy.
Absolutely. And the environment that you're pointing to is key, right? And it can affect us on many different levels. It's our perception of what they think of you. You're projecting what you think they think of you, right?
Right.
It's the discomfort of the change that may not be received the way you would like it to be received. Sometimes it's lack of support and actually being put down, right?
Yes.
And then the last thing I think that's really difficult to do is this unknown. Who am I going to be as
Right.
this person? Like, I'm starting over. Like, now I have to prove to my own self that I can do this, that I'm good at it. Am I going to be good at it? Am I not going to be good at it? I have a lot to figure out, and it's a little bit like starting over. So there's that discomfort
Yes.
that we're facing. So yeah, it's not as easy as I'm just going to step into this new identity.
Yes. Yes.
But
Exactly.
isn't it? Do you find in your experience, Carla, that the discomfort that we feel in the moment of transition is that limiting belief banging up against us?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
I truly believe so, because, without ill intention or any sort of malicious, I think that so many of us have been conditioned to believe that we're not good enough, or we're not worthy of the things that we are seeking in our life. And so when we're looking at making these changes, so often we're actually preventing ourselves from doing it because we just don't feel like we're even capable of taking on this new identity, or taking on this new project, or whether it's starting a new business. We just don't feel like we're going to be able to be successful at it, because a lot of our conditioning has been around either conditional love. So you're a good little girl or a good little boy, and so you're going to get rewarded with XYZ. But again, so much of it stems from us just not feeling worthy enough for the grandness of the dreams that we all dream, right? And through my journey, I've come to realize that I was raised Catholic and was raised in a very traditional Catholic home. And so God was always in my life. God has always been a part of my life. But I find one of the challenges that I've had with sort of religion, and I'm not trying to be political here, but is that there is the teachings have always been for me that God is going to punish me if I do something wrong. And one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through my journey is that is so far from the truth. And that in reality, I am God. You are God. We are all versions of God. And so why would God want to punish us for our mistakes? And really, are they mistakes, or are they just opportunities for us to learn and evolve and grow and become better version of ourselves? And I think that if there's one thing that I can sort of impart on our listeners, or on your listeners, is that the more we can start to identify with ourselves as being the creator, just like God is, that easier it becomes for us to start to find our worthiness, to start to find our self-love, and to really start to come out of our comfort zone, because we'll know at that point that even there is no such thing as failure. There's no failing at anything we do in life. It's just an opportunity for us to get some feedback so we can improve on ourselves and become better versions of ourselves each and every day.
Yeah, one of the limiting beliefs, and I've noticed this myself, in early life, about filling my bucket up with evidence. I was actually talking with my nephew about graduation, because he had taken a little bit of psychology in high school, and just the cursory stuff, and he was talking about biases, and I think one of the ones that's prevalent in that you can see demonstrated quite easily is the confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
So you hold on to this belief that, geez, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, whatever. And of course, that everything that didn't work out for you becomes evidence to confirm, there you go. See, God doesn't love me. I'm not worthy, all this kind of stuff, right? And before you know it, you've got this huge rucksack full of evidence. And you wonder why you feel so heavy and weighted down, and like you said, all these anxieties and pressures that are coming towards you. So what is the step to recognize that you're carrying all this baggage then?
For me, it really starts with, we have to observe our thought pattern. We have to take a moment to sit back and listen to the thoughts that are constantly running sort of on like a broken record that just go on repeat over and over again. If we start to pay attention to those thoughts, that will give us a lot of insight to the underlying belief systems that we hold about ourselves or about the world around us. And more importantly, once we start to have an idea or a pang of inspiration where we're like, oh, I want to try this, or I want to venture off and do this, immediately after, just pause and witness the thoughts that come to the surface. And if those thoughts are hindering you from taking those steps forward towards the things that you're desiring, then it's a strong sign that you have some underlying belief system about yourself that is actually holding you back. And again, I didn't realize that, but now that I've learned everything that I have learned, I can actually go back and look at different pivotal points in my life where I wanted to make changes and just never took those steps forward because all of the thoughts that were running through my mind was that I wasn't worthy and I wasn't good enough to take those steps going forward. And so absolutely, I think before we can ever make any changes in our life, we first have to identify and recognize where we are in the present moment. It's like when we're traveling, if we go and put, the address on a GPS system to where we want to go, the GPS system needs to know where you are in the moment to be able to map out your starting point to your destination. And it's no different when it comes to this healing journey, right? And what I've witnessed over the last few years has been that, with this trend of mindsetness and healing, and it's all great. I completely support it. But with this trend of people, it's almost become a trend of people wanting to just jump on the bandwagon of saying that they're being mindful or they're being positive, but really they're not doing the deep inner work to get them to a place where they actually are vibrating at a much higher frequency of positivity because they've done the work and they've shed all of those belief systems. And so, again, I go back to the point where it starts with us just really taking a moment to identify what are those belief systems that we hold and that are ultimately limiting us from moving forward. And to that point, I would like to say that I do have a little workbook that I offer all of my clients. And, I'm happy to share with your audience that is a little bit of a guide on how people can, it's a journaling practice that allows them to start tapping into what belief systems they have in place about themselves. Because again, with that first step of awareness, then we can actually start to make a plan to how we want to move forward. But awareness is key, and taking a moment to identify is the first step, in my opinion.
And awareness from an objective point of view rather than a subjective, because you don't want to buy into the narrative. You want to be curious about the narrative.
Right, exactly.
You want to be aware, right? The awareness, but then I also want to highlight what you pointed to. Now you got to do the work. You can't just sugarcoat it. You can't just.
That's Fatí's very favorite word, the work.
Yes, you have to do the work. Yes,
have to do the work, because that like being positive, it's bypass, it's avoidance. What bypass avoidance? You're avoiding the difficult part of this, which is feeling the discomfort and really going to the root of it and seeing like what has led me here to believe this about myself, right? And it's not going to shift by saying, I am powerful and I'm empowered today. I believe that I can. Yeah. If the underlying belief is still there and it's rooted in an experience that's linked to your childhood or it came from, it's a cluster of beliefs. It comes from somewhere else. Wherever you find it, there's other beliefs around it. So bypassing, sorry, my positive people, doesn't work.
Yeah, affirmations are not enough. I mean, they're one of the ingredients in the recipe to help with the transformation, but just focusing on affirmations is not going to get us to that place of transformation. As you said, we do need to do the deep inner work, right? We need to go into those darker places and feel the pain that we experience, but with a different lens, a lens of looking at our situation with how can I walk away from this experience or this situation that happened, and what do I need to learn from it? What personal responsibility can I take for it, but also what do I need to learn from it? And maybe let me take a moment to address that personal responsibility comment. It's not about owning blame for what has happened or the experiences that we've had. It's not about assuming that we are at fault for what has transpired. But now that the situation has actually happened in our life, what personal responsibility can we take going forward to either change the situation or change something about ourselves that is going to ensure that this situation doesn't come up again in the future? Or if it does come up in the future, how are we going to handle it differently now that we have a little bit more insight and more knowledge and more information about our past experiences? And so doing the deep inner work is about taking responsibility, but about responsibility in how we're going to move forward from here, not in owning any part of what happened to us or taking, any blame for those situations, but how can we empower ourselves now to be able to move forward?
I think that's a huge distinction because, right away when you put that word in, people have often said, say, are you saying I was responsible for that event?
Right.
And then and they also feel that there's an attachment to that event that because it happened, I therefore cannot move forward.
Right.
And what we're pointing to is no, actually, that's totally the opposite. We're not denying anything that's ever happened to you in the past, because that is your past.
In fact, we're telling you to feel it.
Yeah.
To
Well,
really feel it.
And then there's an opportunity to disconnect from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. To release it from our timeline, because, and it's not to release, again, the growth that we gain from it. It's to release the pain that we're holding on to from the perspective that we have of the experience, right? Like we all create stories around each and every situation that we encounter.
Mhm.
And really it's about learning how to release that story, release that pain that is holding us back. But looking at the situation with the lens of saying, okay, this experience happened, positive or negative. What can I learn from this that is going to allow me to now move forward and create a new version of myself, or step into that life that I've always wanted? Or maybe it's creating the boundaries that are so desperately needed in certain situations where people are just allowing themselves to, continuously be mistreated. To your example earlier, the reason why the first part of my years, like the first 30 plus years of my life, were what I think was a constant lesson of learning. There was so much pain in those years. It was because I wasn't learning the true fundamental lesson that I needed to learn from each of those experiences. And that lesson was that I am worthy. I'm worthy of better. I'm worthy of and deserving of love and all these other wonderful things. But I never learned that. And so every time I kept going out into the world and just repeating the same mistake over and over and over again, until the message got so loud that I had no choice but to actually take the time and go on that journey of saying, okay, well, why do I even believe these things about myself? Are they even true? And maybe someone told me those things when I was younger, or maybe someone tells you these things in the moment that you're not good enough, but how can we pause and look for the evidence in our own life to disprove that? Because there is evidence in your life that proves that you are worthy, proves that you are good enough, proves that we deserve abundance and greatness. It's just we have to start changing that programming that we've all been fed and ultimately is not serving us in any way.
Yeah.
And like going back to the awareness piece, like we're so clueless about those things being there, right?
Yeah.
And so the being able to see it is massive, because now you can actually see what it is that's blocking you versus walking unconsciously, repeating, and really having these patterns run your life in the underground, and you have zero awareness of it. You have no clue that that you even believe these things, right? And you can only have that awareness through that, going back to the deep inner work. There's no way around it.
One of the things I find interesting is that people will often see that in others, but they'll never see it in themselves.
Yes.
You know, and it's like, yeah, you know, like if anybody came up to you, like your best friend came up to you and said, you know, man, I really want to do this, but I really feel like I can't do it. And you, right away you would say, I don't know where you get that idea. Like, you're just a terrific guy. You're all this kind of stuff, right? And then when somebody says that to them or whatever, it's like, no, you don't understand.
Right.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that we
It
could
really
we could
is.
see it in others, but we deny it in ourselves, right?
Yeah, and that was
a
the longest time. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we cut you off there, Carla.
Oh, I was saying that was me for the longest time. You know, I was able to
Me
see the
too.
greatness in everyone else, but when it
Me
came
too.
to me, I was like, no, there's no way. You can't do that. You can't do this. And here's another important point to make is that a lot of times people don't even think about their belief in that way. People aren't sitting there thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. It's not necessarily those thoughts that are running through their mind. It shows up in different ways. It shows up in the way of saying, okay, you know, you're looking for that job, you want to take that next step in your career, but there's that hesitation to say, oh no, you don't have the skill set, or no one will take you seriously. It's those other little thoughts that actually hint at the underlying problem.
Yeah, they're very subtle.
It's the set of evidence, right? The set of evidence at work. So that's why bypass doesn't work, because you're telling yourself you're bypassing one thing, but it's operating on many different levels, right? So it doesn't really work to do the affirmation on one thing that you have identified, because there's all these other beliefs and things that have literally like entered every aspect of your life. Like there's different versions of it, and different, it really is the evidence that proves to yourself that you're not good enough, right? But the opposite is true as well. The evidence system works both ways, right? Once you can believe that you are, then the evidence system brings you all the reasons why you are worthy.
Or even sometimes the evidence changes, like because one thing I've learned anyways, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is the circumstances happen. Like, stuff happens out in the world. When I'm personally involved in it, there's a tendency to attach meaning to some of the things, and those meanings are coming from my limiting beliefs. I may not think of it at the time, but I could be doing a project or whatever, something even very simple like some art stuff, and all of a sudden can't draw a straight line, or colors aren't working, and you could feel the frustration. But the frustration is coming from a meaning, not from the fact that the circumstances are just happening, right? And it's at that point where I notice that, oh, that's just that running back in the background again. It doesn't mean anything. If anything, it means take a new sheet of paper and start over again.
Right.
I mean, we're the ones who attach meaning to everything, as you said, right? And we can easily change what that meaning is, so long as, again, we've done that deep inner work and we've cleared away some of that pain, that we can actually start to attach different meaning to the experiences that we're
Or
having.
no meaning.
Or no meaning. Yes, exactly.
We don't have to attach any meaning to a lot of things, right?
Exactly.
So I'm curious, like, I mean, we've talked about, the work. The work is really, really never done.
No.
I mean, and I think that scares people a little bit too. It's like, like, because it sounds daunting.
Yes, it does. It sounds like, we're always going to be on this journey of pain and suffering and, the ups and downs. And again, I don't think that the work always has to be filled with pain and suffering. Work can just be about, allowing us to go to the next version of ourselves and doing the work behind what it takes for us to release some of the versions of ourselves that we need to release in order to embrace a new version. So it doesn't always necessarily mean that it has to be filled with pain and suffering.
No.
And also, I mean, I think that we've all been conditioned to believe that doing the work is hard, and it can be at times, rather challenging, but there are so many practices and tools out there that are available to us that can make this process so much more easy, like so much easier for us than having to rehash and relive all of the pain of the experiences we've had, right? So we can do the work without having to relive the emotions. And that's, I think, is important for people to know, because again, so many people believe that if they're going to venture down this path of healing, that they're going to be stuck in all of those emotions that they've experienced or all of that trauma that they felt in the past, when in reality, there's so many ways for us to do the work and the releasing without having to actually relive the pain and the trauma in the present moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that feeling, reliving the trauma is a crucial initial process to spot what you need to work on. But the continuous rehearsal of it,
Right.
which often happens in the therapy model. In therapy, you're constantly rehearsing that. That's really painful and unnecessary, because like you're saying, there are tools to kind of release that without having to stay in the emotion, because it is in the past, it has passed. But it's important to allow it to come through by feeling it. And once you do it in the proper way, you don't really have to continue to feel that, like you're saying. So I love that you pointed to this, because I think it's a really important detail of this that people have a misunderstanding around. So fully agree. So I was wondering, as we're coming to the end of this, if there is anything that you want to leave our audience with, if there's anything that we should have asked you that we didn't, anything that you want to add. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would love to impart on your listeners is that, as again, going back to those limiting beliefs, we all have these belief systems that it can be challenging to do this deep inner work. I'm going to challenge everyone to maybe start reframing that in saying, instead of saying that it's hard work, that we reframe it to say that it's sacred work, because the work is so important for us to do. And I think it's, from my experience and what I've been learning over the last few years, that is the reason why we're here. We're here as spiritual beings to do the work, to release, our past pains, our past traumas, our experiences from our energy field, but to learn from those, or to take those lessons that we've learned from those experiences and allow it to create better versions of ourselves. And so I would just invite everyone to start reframing the way they look at the work, instead of looking at it from a lens of this is going to be difficult, to start changing that language to say that this is sacred work and it's important for me to go on this journey so that I can embody that best version of myself, because that's what we're here to experience, is that best version of ourselves. But we can only get there once we've done that sacred work. And that's a lot of what I teach in my coaching program. Is I actually teach my students a 3-step process to being able to unlock their full potential. We really need to go through what I call the release phase. And that phase is all about identifying what those limiting beliefs are, getting to the root of what those belief systems are, and actually releasing them from our timeline, releasing them from our energetic field. The second phase of that is now learning to build practices or have practices in your life that are going to cultivate a deeper connection with your soul. Because when we start to connect with ourselves at that deeper level, we'll be able to get the guidance that we need to move forward and take the steps forward in our life. And it will ultimately help us get out of our comfort zone and start to embody, again, that best version of ourselves and tap into our infinite potential. Because, again, we're God, we're the creator. So we have the ability to create absolutely anything we want in our life, whether it's to continue down the path that we're on and continue in pain and misery, or to do that sacred deep work and transform your life to absolutely anything that you can possibly imagine it to be.
Yeah, excellent. And give yourself the permission to be happy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Excellent.
word. Thank you. Thank you so much for.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah.
Thank you both. It's been great.
So we'll you have a little offering. We'll a PDF for our audience. That'll be in our link of in the description. And check out her website. It's a quite extensive website. It's a beautiful website. Awaken Harmony.
Yes. Yes.
And
we all need to awaken that harmony that's within us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this episode, share it. Help us amplify our impact. If you know anyone that needs to hear this, let them know. Point them in this direction. Listen to the podcast if that's your preferred method to receive this information. Subscribe, follow us, give us some love, help us support the show, and just spread the love.
Yeah. All right. Till the next time. Thank you.
Until next time. Thank you, Carla.